Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Cybersecurity Recruiter podcast. Today, I'm joined by Dave Peterson. Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Good afternoon, everybody.
Yeah, good. We were just saying we're both in pretty chirpy, smiley moods for a Monday, aren't we, my friend?
I have nothing to complain about. Yeah, it's beautiful weather here. I'm happy.
Good. I always say when I'm on the podcast and people talk about weather, I always say don't talk about weather to UK guys because we just don't get any.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. But Dave, just for the listeners that don't know who you are, I'm just going to do you a bit of an intro. Feel free to correct me if I get anything wrong. But back in the mid 90s, you were in the Marine Corps, signals intelligence and electronic warfare. You then transitioned into you were in the intelligence community professional, which you did for just over 13 years. You then went on to set up a company called Ridgeline International. You were then senior director of ops for
Yeah.
Prometheus Systems, and currently, and this is a position you've held for just over 7.5 years now, you are the founder, president, and CEO of Fenix Group Inc. Yeah, welcome to the
Yeah.
show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No worries at all. So, I've done you a bit of an intro there, Dave. I never think I can do it as well as you. So I'll start how I normally start the show, which is who are you and what have you been up to over the years to get you where you are today?
Oh, yeah. Thanks again for having me on. First and foremost, I'm a dad. So I have a couple of kids, and that's my primary job, I would say. But professionally, I cut my teeth in the Marine Corps, like you said. I was only a Marine for about 5 years before 9/11. And then 9/11 happened, and I got sucked into the dark empire over there in the intelligence community. I did that for quite some time. Traveled to, I don't know, 70 some countries, did a lot of counterterrorism work. And then I started Phoenix Group because of some problems that we were experiencing in Syria related to communications. It was not an unsophisticated enemy like we found ourselves facing in Afghanistan and Iraq and Yemen and other places. We started bumping up against Russians there and completely different animal. I had an idea for how I could fix some communications gaps in the US military. To DARPA, they gave us a little seed round of funding and we've been growing ever since. And in December, we signed an acquisition agreement with Nokia. So we will soon be Nokia people, a wholly owned subsidiary. Yeah, that's my story.
Mm. Yeah, no, brilliant. Thanks for that, Dave. And yeah, congratulations on the event and the transaction. Was it stress free or was it okay? Or
I won't say it was without stress. It's a very long diligence cycle. Anytime you sell a company to a large multi-billion-dollar multinational, it's going to come with some stressors. But we got through it. Super happy to be joining the team over there at Nokia. And as an aside, one of the things I do is a hobby is helping veterans start businesses. I think they have the DNA to be the best entrepreneurs on the planet. They know how to deal with hardship. They know what it is to grind. So that's something I do when I can. I help guys get on their feet.
that's definitely something I'd like to talk more about. And yeah, I agree with you on the veteran thing. I think I've heard a lot of things lately say motivation's overrated and it's all about kind of discipline and structure and stuff like that. And coming from that veteran background, that's something that you're going to have in abundance. But Dave, what you mentioned there about helping veterans start businesses, I want to get into that. I know we were talking just before we came on air about the fact you do public speaking, come out of the Marine Corps, set up a business, gone through an acquisition. I've got a couple of friends that have sold businesses and they said to me, you just would not believe what you have to go through to get it to that point of sale, merger, acquisition, exit, whatever it might be. So yeah, in essence, what I'm trying to say is you sound like you really push yourself, you get out your comfort zone on a frequent basis, and I know that can often translate into career progression. So there's a lot to unpack there. But on the veterans, when people before we come on to the business side, when you were transitioning out, was it scary? Was it nerve wracking? Is there anything that you know now about that you wish you knew back then?
Absolutely, yeah. Getting out of government is much harder than going in. Even the military. People think it's scary to join the military because you're giving up your freedoms and all of that, but getting out is much more difficult. There's no safety net. When they let you go, they let you go. You're a used to be. Nobody wants to hang out anymore. There's no real training for transition. You just have to go figure it out. And there are a lot of lessons that you learn the hard way that I think are unnecessary. So that's what I try to do, is just help people understand that even if they have a good idea, it doesn't mean you should mortgage your house to go build your widget to start your business. That's the wrong way. There's different paths you can take to be successful, and there's a lot of landmines out there too.
What do you see when people are first transitioning out? What's the first things that people should do? Is there anything they could sort before they get out, or is there anything any initial steps you'd advise, or courses or training or anything like that? Or
I think it's always helpful to have an idea of what's going to happen about a year away from your exit. Have a plan. But I see two different types of people getting out of the military or government in general. It doesn't have to be the military. Any sort of public servant who has been dependent on the government for their livelihood and their mission, their purpose in life. When you leave that, it can be pretty daunting. You have to have a plan. The two different kinds of people I see are, there's one type who's going to retire and just coast, right? They're just looking for a job that's going to pay the bills and they don't really care. They've left their purpose behind. Maybe they're pursuing personal goals now and it's not all about work. And then the other kind is incensed. So they're getting out and they still have a fire in them and they want to go do something meaningful. And we call it chasing the dragon. So those folks, they're the dangerous ones. They're the people that are going to go out and shake things up, sometimes to their detriment and sometimes for the betterment of everyone around them. And it depends on how they pursue that fire, whether they're gonna make it or fail.
okay, cool. So, incensed, fire, chasing the dragon. Let's talk about that type for a minute. Dave, when you first make that transition, so now where you are, you've just gone through an acquisition and you've had your business for 7.5 years. If we go back a bit though, you get an idea. Where do you start from there? So you've come out, you've got an idea, you want to do your own business, you've got this kind of fire inside. Where did you start? Like, did you have support around you? Had you gained some knowledge before you came out? People will be listening going, how?
Yeah, no, I didn't have much help at all. And this is why I took it upon myself to help people who want to do this, who want to take this path. I made all the mistakes someone can make starting a business. I cashed out my 401k. I did all the things you should not do to fund a startup. And that can get you going for a little while, but most folks fail. Like, I have a friend who put a second mortgage on his home because he thought he had the greatest idea ever for a widget and he was going to make it and then sell it to the military without understanding that the military takes 2-3 years to buy something. So how do you support yourself in the meantime? Well, lots of lessons learned there that people don't need to make if there's a support network around them.
Yeah, definitely, Dave. And when you are helping veterans, what kind of is there any kind of like maybe 2 or 3 things that you're commonly advising them on or helping them on, or do you see common things that kind of keep cropping up that you have to nudge people or push people in the right direction that could help the listeners?
Yeah, you mentioned it at the beginning of our conversations. There's a lot of structure that goes into a business. So typically, those people with fire in them, if they are former military, they're used to being very aggressive with their ideas, and they'll just, here we go, without necessarily understanding all of the legal frameworks and the things that go along with actually running a business. It's super important to have your ducks in a row. Even before you hire anyone, you have to have a framework under you that's going to support a scalable business that has some legs under it. So that's one of the things I help people do, is very basic legal things. I do some coaching. I'll have folks give me their pitch and then I'll present risk to them. Because what is business? Business is nothing more than measured risk. That's what business is in 2 words. It's measured risk. It's the relationships you have and figuring out how to provide some value to someone else and get paid for that value. So when people come to me with an idea and they say, hey, Dave, I put a second mortgage on my home and I have this prototype, the first thing I do is I grab them and I go, stop. How are you structured? Are you an LLC? Are you an S corporation? Are you taking advantage of tax credits for research and development? And usually they go, I don't know what you're talking about. Sometimes not. Sometimes they know a little bit, and I'm just helping them get things over the fence. But I do a lot of coaching and show them where all of the landmines are, as I call them.
I'm imagining, Dave, that's really helpful because splitting the tasks off, if you've got a particular idea and you want to whether it's sell it to the military or you want to bring it to market or you want to do something. If you've got someone else sorting out research and development tax credits and corporate structure, I'm imagining it's pretty hard to, I don't know, perhaps you managed it, but I'm imagining it's pretty hard to juggle 4, 5, 6 things at once and run the business effectively and keep the team happy and hire the right people. So if you can come in and advise people and kind of segment jobs off, I'm imagining that's pretty useful for guys and girls. Yeah.
Yeah, every entrepreneur is doing all of those things. Every entrepreneur is wearing 10, 12, 15 hats, especially in the beginning. When you have a smart team around you, you can relax a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's all about providing focus when I do coaching. So if sales is the predominant focus area of an entrepreneur and they're worried about money and not product or service or whatever, that's backwards. That's wrong. You have to be fully focused on what it is you're doing for the customer, whether it's a product or service. You focus on that and money comes because you're putting quality into what you do. You're making the customer's priority your priority. When it starts to flip and it starts to become about ones and zeros and the finance guys are breathing down your neck, that's when things get sideways.
Yeah, we've all seen it with various different companies before. They go through that life cycle, or maybe too big, too quick, or wherever it might be. So yeah, I think we can all probably relate to that. We've all seen that before. Dave, if people are listening and they are a veteran looking to set up on their own or whatever it might be, do they just reach out to you via email or do they just call you? How does that how does it work?
Yeah, I usually just have people contact me on LinkedIn. That way my work email doesn't get all filled up. A couple of folks I've helped on LinkedIn and we formed relationships that way. And I'm still in contact with them, watching them grow, which is great to see. I love to see people succeed. That's the easiest way to contact me.
Yeah, cool. And then the next question I wanted to ask is, so at the minute we're talking about an acquisition to Nokia and like that all sounds like amazing. Can you tell us about some tough times along the way and maybe from the mental side and the mindset side, like how do you get through tough times, like when everything seems really hard? And I think in this market, there's people out there, whether it be job seekers or people in business, probably having a tough time. How do you push through and build those resilience levels? Any tips for the listeners on that front?
That's why I say I think veterans have all the DNA necessary to be a good entrepreneur. Adversity comes with military service, right? And it's going to happen in business too, maybe much worse than you might expect. Sometimes, I've said this 100 times, I'd rather be shot at in Afghanistan again than go through whatever business problem we're facing is. But Steve Jobs said it, Elon Musk said it, like the key to success in business is just not quitting. It's just persistence. So if there's an obstacle in front of you, you can either go fetal and curl up into a little ball and quit, and in that case, maybe you shouldn't have started a business to begin with. Or you can just look at it as an obstacle and go, I'm going to go over it, through it, around it, under it, whatever. And in that way, you end up learning a ton. So for me, going through this whole 1.5 years of effort with Phoenix Group has been the greatest learning opportunity of my life. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I know more now than I ever could have paid for at a university for the entrepreneurial experience certificate or whatever MBA program. I've done sell side capital investment raise work. I've done a little bit of M&A scouting on the buy side. I've done everything that an executive can do, just in a smaller subset. Right? I'm rambling a little bit. Hopefully, I answered your question.
No, it's good, Dave, and it's interesting, and I like that about just not quitting. And I say it's just interesting. You mentioned earlier that obviously things have gone really well, but you've used things like not giving up, made a load of mistakes, and it's quite nice to hear you say that because all people see at the end is acquisition to Nokia and think it was just that, but obviously it wasn't. There was a lot of stress and pain along the way.
Sure, I won't say it was all me. It certainly wasn't. There's a little bit of luck involved. And more than that, I have people around me who are much smarter than I am and excellent at what they do. And so I've tried to surround my people. My team is incredible. There's no way I can thank them enough for where we're at now. But getting a team of people together who share a common vision is critical for success. Nobody can do it alone. But yeah, to your point, I see a lot of books and YouTube videos and stuff where all people talk about is their success. There's no mention of the hard times. And I can tell you, early in our history, there were times where we didn't know if we were going to make payroll on a Thursday, and payroll's on a Friday the next day, and magically we sorted it out. But it's not a straight line. It's very lumpy, and there are going to be super difficult challenges that you're going to face. And you just have to have a high risk tolerance and look at those problems from not a point of weakness or failure, but from a perspective of, okay, how am I going to solve this? What am I going to do to make this work? And then you just line up the problems next, and you knock them down. That's all it is.
Yeah. It's really you're not the first entrepreneur I've had on that said that payroll scenario where they've literally got a day or two to find the money, and I'm sure you won't be the last. And it's risk tolerance is a good way of putting it. Dave, do you have any like coping mechanisms or like any kind of routine that you do? I know you mentioned there like knocking the jobs off. I'm imagining that getting the momentum going in your head, but any kind of any coping mechanisms when you're under that level of stress that you go to?
It's important to have personal time, right? So, like for me, I enjoy hanging out with my kids. That's what I do in my off time. I have a little dog, take him to the park. And then you have to have some long term goals. So, no one starts a business with the idea of just working until they're dead. Everyone has an idea of what's going to happen 5, 6, 10 years down the road. And that's either going to be an exit or it's going to be I'm going to establish a lifestyle company and have somebody else run it for me. And that's just a different sort of exit in my mind. So one of the things I do is planning for retirement is fun for me. I'm learning a language right now, planning on maybe living overseas when I'm older. You have to have something working out, whatever it is. You have to have something to get your head straight when the workday's over.
Okay, you're planning on living?
I don't know yet. I'm
Okay.
torn. Either Portugal or Thailand. We'll see.
Okay. Okay. I've not been to Thailand, but Portugal's very nice.
Yeah, I've been to Portugal many
Yeah,
times.
yeah. I don't know if you're a golfer, but if you're a golfer, you'll love it.
Southern Portugal in particular. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. All right, Dave. Did you start off with the acquisition in mind? Then you mentioned that businesses are started off. Did that naturally evolve, or was that right? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this, and was it that planned, or did it evolve a bit along the way? Or
No, you don't go into it. I would say that when you first start, you should be focused on execution, not exit, because you have nothing to sell in the beginning. Your shares are worth zero or whatever.
Mm.
The acquisition by Nokia was good from a technical and a cultural fit standpoint. We run a tactical telecommunications company here. So Nokia started out as a supplier for us and evolved from there. We did a bunch of projects together. I think Nokia's strategy was starting to move into defense, specifically after the Ukraine war kicked off, and it was a natural alignment. But we said no to a couple of companies who asked us to sell. Not because I didn't want to exit. It was just if you spend years building something, the first thing you want to do is protect your people, right? So I didn't want to do any harm to my employees. I wanted to make sure that they were taken care of. And you have to have a good cultural fit, good technical fit if you're a tech company. And the first two companies that offered us a buyout couldn't provide that. And with Nokia, it was right in the sweet spot from an alignment standpoint. And I got some guarantees that my people would be taken care of. Every single person here is joining the Nokia federal team, and there's some longevity to that. So that was the decision point for me.
yeah, cool. So you wanted it to align. You wanted the staff to be looked after. You wanted it to be a cultural fit. You wanted to know it was going to progress on and carry on. I see. It's your baby. You've built it.
Yeah, I want to see it scale, right?
Yeah, definitely. Just, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong. You mentioned there like you wouldn't want to start out with an exit in mind, and I'm imagining like from a mindset perspective, like when things get tough, if you're just doing it to exit, I can imagine when things get tough, it's probably even tougher. Whereas if you're in it for the long game, like we say,
Mhm.
it's your baby. That's it. I'm guessing in those really tough times, it's easier to pull through and keep your head where it needs to be. Is that the case?
I think so. I think if you're a founder, if you're an executive, and you're spending all your time talking to VC and PE firms and potential suitors who might be looking to acquire you, instead of going and fulfilling whatever your total addressable market is, you're going to end up selling from a much lower price tag. If you're busy building your enterprise and your portfolio of customers, you're adding to your patent portfolio, all of those things, you're going to be much more attractive. It's almost like when you're in high school and you want to date a pretty girl, everybody wants the person that they can't have, right? Who's not even looking. So if you're busy out there just executing and you're making a name for yourself, you're going to attract attention. It's just natural. So that I found that to be very true. We didn't go looking for an acquirer. It just naturally happened.
I, I I really like that, and that makes a lot of sense. I think if larger companies know that you're just doing this for an exit, and yeah, I can see that heavily affecting the multiple you get or the sale price you get. How did it come about then, Dave? So did I don't know if you can't say any of this, just please feel free to tell me. But did they approach you? How did it happen? Did you just get a call one day? It'd be interesting to know that story, if that's okay.
Yeah, like I said, Nokia started out as a supplier, and a couple of years ago now, Nokia decided to move hard into the defense space. So in the US, there's a new entity called Nokia Federal that was established, and we started developing a pretty good relationship with the team there. Mike Loomis is the CEO at Nokia Federal. We developed a good friendship with Nokia as a supplier to Phoenix Group, and more they started to get interested in what we were doing. And we started looking at ways to create efficiencies. That's how it started between Nokia and Phoenix Group. We were buying systems from them.
Mm.
We were using those systems for tactical use cases. And eventually the question came up, if we were one team, we can make all these efficiencies happen administratively, and we could add this value to you, you add this value to us. Would you like to have this conversation? And I could see it coming. You can see a storm on the horizon because it was just so natural for that to occur. It was an immediate, yeah, let's talk about that.
I tell you what, I bet it's such a wicked feeling when someone like the thing you've built with the team to it's the ultimate compliment, isn't it? Like it must be nice.
Yeah, I think credit is due to my team, not me. I have some of the smartest engineers on the planet here. I have an incredible executive staff, director staff. Every single person here is handpicked, and any credit is due to them. I'm the guy that I deal with failure, right? I'm the guy that I'm responsible for failure, but the success of the company that we've had belongs to them.
Yeah, it's interesting too. You said that. Do you know as well, Dave? What I think the pattern I noticed with successful founders is like lots of self awareness, humility. So you're saying stuff like like having the awareness to bring a team in and do this and do that. If you were just like purely driven on ego, I'm imagining none of this would have happened. You've got to have the humility to step back and do this. It's an important characteristic, I think, isn't it?
I've seen ego kill so many relationships. I actually made a sign and put it by the front door, and it says, "Leave your ego at home,"
Okay. Okay.
because it just gets in the way of things, right? Like I don't care. I don't care about any of that. I don't care how cool you think you are. I don't care how right you think you are. If there's conflict because of ego, that's a problem. So I don't like it. I think you can get a lot more done by just communicating well, and it's important for me that we don't bring in a lot of outside ego.
Have you always been like that? Were you always pretty down to earth from a young age, or is that something you had to work on? Or
It's definitely something I had to work on. Like when I was fighting overseas, I was not a humble person. I was super aggressive. I knew I was right all the time, and it caused issues for me relationship wise in my life. I think the key is just recognizing that and figuring out, okay, what do I have to do to be a better communicator? What do I have to do to be a better team player, leader, whatever you want to call it? And I'm super conscious of it in everything I do. It's not like a thing that it's not natural to me. I just have to, like, it's foremost in my mind all the time,
okay,
being a good communicator.
yeah. So it sounds like being conscious and having the awareness was the first step to getting where you wanted to get. So if I'm listening and I'm like, if I'm listening and I've got an ego, I know I need to drop it. Maybe it's holding me back. Could be in a business sense, could be internal promotions, just could be something it's holding me back at work from career progression. If I'm listening now, the awareness side sounds like it's really important. Is there anything else that you'd recommend for listeners to do if they know they need to improve on that particular aspect of themselves?
I think humility goes a long way. I think it's underrated. And I think listening is just as important. So a lot of employee problems that I've seen throughout my career are mostly due to just someone not listening. So if an employee has a problem and they bring it to you and you go, the rules say you're wrong, do it anyway, you're going to lose that employee. You're going to lose them. Having some EQ and the ability to listen, and not just listen, but do something about it when people have a grievance or an issue. That doesn't mean they're going to get exactly what they want all the time. The reality is what it is, but you have to listen and let them know that they're valued and they're being heard. And I think that's as much a part of being a good leader as anything.
Yeah, definitely, and I think listening as well. I think it's such an underrated skill because it's harder than it sounds. See, we just said, "Oh, to listen," whatever. I notice, especially since doing this pod, like you have to listen, but
Yeah,
it requires effort.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've seen guys who just don't want to make the time because of their position, their station, in whatever organization they're in, and they go, "You have to make an appointment," and that is not the way, right? Like you have to. If somebody has an issue, assuming you can stop what you're doing and listen, that means the world to people.
it does.
If you stop whatever your schedule is, you're in a meeting and somebody says, "Hey, Dave, Thomas, I know you're busy right now, but I really need to talk." And you go, "Okay." And you end your call so that you can talk to them. That means that goes a long way.
Yeah, it does. And you mentioned about communication and how important that is. I think when people know you've given them your time, when people know that you've listened to them and you can demonstrate that's the way by communicating effectively, I think it makes them more likely to listen to you. And then all of a sudden, we're all communicating well. And
Yeah, it's not just internal either. The same applies when you're talking to customers, right? If they're telling you their requirements for whatever it is they want you to do, and you're too busy thinking about what you're going to say next and you're not really hearing them, you're not going to get that work. They're going to go find somebody who will listen and address their needs properly. So it's not just an internal thing. It's helped us with business development and sales and all that. Just truly listening and being there for whoever it is that needs your attention.
yeah, definitely, David. And again, it's something that's coming up again and again on the pod. Some of the you're a very technical chap yourself, and I've had lots of technical people on, and the communication piece just rings loud and clear in terms of how important it is. People really value that. It brings me quite nicely on to the next thing I wanted to talk about, Dave, which is like public speaking and stuff like that. How's that going? Is that something that is scary? How did all that come about? And any thoughts on that?
I don't do that often. I don't know how it happened. I think it started with a podcast or two, and then people asked me to speak here and there. I was just at Georgetown University talking to their MBA cohort at the McDonough School. And what I like about it, it's not scary to me. I love to teach. I really like to pass on knowledge. I don't have all the answers. I'm not an oracle, but I do enjoy teaching people lessons learned because as a Marine, I tend to learn the hard way. I just beat my head against the wall until it falls down. And usually there's like a gate open over here that I could have walked through. So I like talking to people and teaching them what I've learned and maybe how there's a better way. If I have another career after this, I would love to teach.
Yeah, good. I think there's a lot of benefits to teaching. Obviously, benefits for the people on the receiving end are obvious, but in terms of reinforcing your own knowledge, sense of purpose, stuff like that. But going back to the speaking thing, I still find it's like today's Monday. I'm having a coffee now. I had a couple of coffees before this pod, and I started to feel a little. I don't know how many episodes of this show I've done now. It's a lot, but I still do get nervous, and I think it's just good for us to talk about it because people probably hear people like yourself, Dave, speaking, or like this pod now, and think, God, don't they feel like I feel? I think a lot of us out there do. I was going to ask you what's on the horizon for the future. So you talked about teaching. What's kind of day to day like at the minute? Is it pretty chilled, or is it still pretty hectic?
Oh, it's always hectic. For the next few years, I think I'm definitely going to stick around at Nokia. I really do want to see what we've built go global. I started that. We had a little bit of work in the UK, a little bit of work in several countries in Europe and Australia. But Nokia represents something much bigger. So I want to help with that. I think my team does too. And for the next couple of years, I'm going to do that. And then after that, I don't really know. I don't think about it too often. I think about sitting on a beach somewhere someday when I'm much older. I have another decade and a half probably before I start looking seriously at that. But yeah, teaching, coaching, not necessarily for money either. Just because usually the people that need it most don't have any.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, don't worry, you'll find plenty of beaches rounded about in Portugal. I don't think that'll be too challenging for you.
Yeah.
Cool. Just to hop back a bit, so with regard to the business itself, like you mentioned, you used an example of a widget about 20 minutes ago, and how long it takes to get to a stage of a purchase and stuff like that. And I know a lot of SaaS businesses are similar to this. They can have a great idea, but it's actually getting it to the point of sale and stuff like that, and getting the revenue in. So you've obviously managed to do two. You've had a great idea, and you've managed to execute on it, as you said earlier. What tips or hints have you got for actually getting some revenue behind your idea or your product or your service? Any challenges that you had to overcome in relation to that with your own business that could help the listeners, Dave?
Yeah, I think the primary thing you need to worry about is really understanding your total addressable market and not walking in blind just to, for instance, we do defense, right? My product, and we manufacture systems, we manufacture radios in the US, which is not a light undertaking. I'm not going to walk into the oil and gas industry with no knowledge of oil and gas and their culture and the people there, no relationships, and expect to turn revenue around in 6 months. It's not going to happen. We focused on defense because that's where we come from and we understand the inner workings of how procurements are made and that sort of thing. So if you're a software business and you're doing SaaS, and 10 years ago, that was everybody was pushing towards SaaS, right? And now you have a certain customer segment that really, they'd much rather own their software and manage it themselves on-prem, which is 180 degrees from where we started 10 years ago. Everything was pushing to the cloud. Now people want hybrid cloud solutions. They want to own their software. They don't want recurring license fees. So I think listening to your market and going, okay, 80, 90%, 70%, whatever it is, of our total addressable market wants software as a service. Therefore, we are going to key our product design on software as a service. If your research and your analysis tells you that's not the case, you probably shouldn't build it. There are a lot of what I call ugly babies out there, right? On the product side, software and hardware. There's a giant graveyard of good ideas that were poorly executed. I think it goes back to listening, doesn't it? Like listening to your market and doing the work to find out what do they really want, what are their pain points, what are they willing to pay for, and what does my competition look like too. If you go off half-cocked, and I see this in the veteran community sometimes, where they've got a great idea and they're going to go hog wild on making some new thing, and and there's 4 examples of that on the market already. They just don't know about it. So not getting blindsided by the market is another thing to consider, and then barriers to entry. So if you can make something as a brand new entrepreneur, barrier is probably pretty low. So how many other people can do it? And there comes a point in your progression where when you're brand new, when you're a young company, it's just you and your dog. You're cute to your competition. They go, oh, look at this little startup. They're not a threat. And then as you start to create a little bit of revenue, maybe you have an anchor customer who keeps you going for a little while. That's pretty typical in startups. You have one customer who's paying all your bills initially. As you start to branch out and take market share, however small, you're not really cute anymore. So now your competitors are looking at you as a threat and they're trying to figure out how to take you out. And there's 2 ways to do it. They can buy you, or if it's cheaper, they'll just make a better widget and they'll outspend you to recover that market share. So you better be aware of what you're getting into and how big is the space and is it saturated. There's a million. We could talk for days on that.
Yeah, I think two massive things you've said there as well at the start is you were talking, you've essentially looked at your own situation and you've leveraged a few things there that are really specific and advantageous. So you talked about understanding the procurement process. You have relationships there. So you haven't just set out to do this business because you fancied it. You've really thought it through and you've leveraged kind of 2 or 3 really big things there that are very specific to you. And I'm imagining that was pretty smart move.
You have to. If you
Yeah.
don't have a plan, nothing's going to happen. Think about going to the bank, right? You want to buy a house. What is the bank going to ask you? Where is the house? What's the address? How much is it worth? Is it in a flood zone? They're going to ask you a million questions, and that's because they want a plan. And the plan is this house at this address with this risk metric for insurance, etc. It's the same in business. If you go to the bank and you go, hey, I want a loan, I'm going to start a business, they're going to go, What? They're going to ask you for a business plan. And the most important thing for a bank is, how are you going to return the payments on this loan? Where's your revenue coming from? If you can't explain that, and you haven't done the analysis, you're not getting any money. And it's the same for VC and PE firms and acquisition. If you don't have a long-term growth strategy, you need to go back to the drawing board, slow down your startup process. If you can't explain that in an elevator, then you're not ready.
Dave, what's the average time between getting started and things getting to the point where you're like, this is really good?
I think a year or two is typical. Everybody likes to talk about how founders eat ramen noodles and white rice for the first year or two and maybe don't even pay themselves. We were a little bit fortunate in that I don't think we were never not able to pay our bills or our salaries or any of that. We were making money on day one, but I wouldn't have started the business if we weren't, right? We had a customer before we started the business, and that was an important decision point. If we hadn't, I don't think there would ever have been a Phoenix Group.
That's a really smart move, having a customer before you start. That's really
Yeah,
good.
it's different for every industry, though, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
software, maybe it's different. If you know the market's there and you've done the analysis, then it's okay. But it's a risk tolerance thing.
Do you struggle on the sleep side when things like you mentioned that payroll thing? Is it hard to sleep when it's like that, or can you just switch off?
Yeah, I don't sleep very well. Even
Okay.
now, I never have. I get maybe 4 hours of sleep a night. I just struggle turning my brain off. But the stressors now are not, are we going to make payroll? It's how are we going to scale globally
Yeah.
with Nokia? How are we going to integrate into Nokia? Those sorts of questions. But yeah, like it's a heavy burden when you're young and those problems pop up. But that doesn't mean you can quit. If it means you go 2, 3 days without sleep to sort it out, then that's what you do.
Yeah, yeah, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because people are depending on you, right? If you have employees and you don't know how to make payroll, those are families. Those are humans with mortgages and cars and bills to pay, and they're depending on you to be there. You better figure it out.
You've got to, let's say, for everyone listening, you've just got to really be into it. Let's say quitting's just not an option. It's happening. I'll find a way. Do you know what I mean? If the first time it gets tough, you're talking about throwing the towel in, then the towel's going to get thrown in pretty quickly. So, yeah, it's got to be
Yeah,
all guns blazing and really in. And I think it goes back to the thing, if you're setting out for an exit and all that, you've really got to want it. On the sleeping thing, Dave, I used to do loads, then I stopped, but I've just started again. And I just find it so good. Like, I really
yeah,
do. Ray Dalio, a well-known hedge fund guy, you've probably heard of him. He swears by it, and I really get what it allows me to do. Is it does allow you just to take a step back on any stressful situation. And like the other morning, I had it. I was in a rush. I was faffing around. I skipped the meditation, and I could literally feel by about mid-morning I was shorter with people. I was getting a bit, and I was like, shit, it's because I've not meditated. So I don't know if you can try it. I know a lot of people say that their mind drifts, but I read a thing that says in a 5 minute window, even if you get 10 seconds or 5 seconds of actually just switching off, apparently that alone is meant to be great. And then you build up and you can eventually get, but I don't know if you're
yeah,
open. I know not everyone's open to it, but it's mega. I love it.
yeah. I've heard a lot about it. Is you do transcendental meditation? Or?
I don't know if it's right or wrong. All I do is basically just close my eyes, breathe through my nose. I just breathe in and I just hold it at the top for maybe 5, 10 seconds, something like that, and out. And I just try and think about nothing apart from breathing in, breathing out. I know some people use music and this, that, and the other, but I read somewhere that there's no right and wrong way to do it. It's whatever works for you. I know some people use an app. I just literally just get rid of every device, get them all miles away from me, and just go and sit on the end of my bed.
Yeah, I'll definitely look into that. It's probably something that could help me sleep too.
It really does help with the sleep as well, 100%. But yeah, let me know how you get on, mate. You mentioned, I think it was when you were saying about transitioning out the Marine Corps, you mentioned you didn't necessarily have a lot of support. I always like to ask people about mentors, and you seem to be like a really well informed chap. So was a lot of this intuitive, or is there mentors that you've had and got for life in your career?
I think the Marine Corps did a great job preparing me for the hardships of just figuring things out. They literally just throw you on the street when you're done with active
Yeah.
military service. They're like, okay, thanks a lot. See ya. Give us all your stuff back.
Oh,
And
God.
then you're on the street. And the good news is that it isn't a surprise that you're leaving service, right? So you have as much or as little time to prepare as you want. And I think one of the reasons a lot of guys stay in the military is they're just not ready. They're not ready to leave, and it can be a comfortable place. Government service. It's you never have to worry about the health of your business. Am I going to get paid? Yeah, you're going to get paid. You develop some great friendships there, but when you leave, it poof, it's gone. So I didn't immediately leave government service. I just changed into the intelligence community because I was scared. I didn't want to leave that comfort blanket. It was when I left the intelligence community that I really experienced, I call it walking the gangplank, like in an old pirate movie. You're on the ship, everything's fine, and then they kick you off the ship, and your hands are tied, and you off into the ocean you go, and you got to figure out how to float. So and to the rest of the world who hasn't been in government service, that's just normal life, right? That's just like every day. They don't get the benefit of having that comfort blanket. But it's a shock. I knew I didn't want to work for a large company at the time. I wanted to build something, and I had a very specific reason why. So I taught myself how to start a business, and here we are.
It's interesting to listen to you speak there, though, because you've gone from being scared to come out into the world to set up your own business and go through an acquisition. So you've gone from one extreme to the other.
Fear's a great motivator.
Yeah.
Fear's the best motivator. If you have a mountain in front of you and there's some catastrophic thing that's going to happen if you can't climb to the top of that mountain, chances are your body can do things that you didn't know it could, and you're gonna get up there. If you don't have that motivation and you curl up into a little ball, okay, you're going to die. Somebody else might come along and pick you up, but you're never going to have the freedom of knowing that you made it to the top of that mountain.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's the thought that gets us all. I heard someone say, yeah, I heard someone say, I can't remember who it was now. I think it was on TV ages ago, and this particular guy said nothing is ever as good or as bad as it seems. Like if you hit the climax in your career, it was good, but maybe that buzz didn't last quite as long as you think. And then on the bad side, nothing's as bad either. So yeah, that's probably, I think it's the thought and the kind of procrastination that gets a lot of us. But
you got to take all the emotion out of it and just apply some logic to whatever the problem is that you're facing. Yeah.
Yeah. Mindset, Dave, it is literally everything. It's just huge, isn't it? The thing that makes it so stark and obvious for me is you can see some people in the same business, same industry, same geography, and the difference between their businesses is massive. So that kind of has to be maybe some ability there, but I think a lot of that is mindset as well.
80% of it is mindset.
Yeah, no, I agree. As we come towards the end, I used to ask, is any books, but any books or podcasts that you listen to that have helped your kind of business career or career in general, or maybe even your self-development as an individual, as a person?
There's one book that I really like that I read recently. It's called Army of None, and it's not really a business book. It's definitely not a business book. It's a futuristic example of what warfare might look like, and it's aligned to the U.S. military's vision for what they want to be. So we've taken some of those ideas and incorporated them into the business because technology is just Legos, right? For the most part, you have true innovators out there, but lots of technology can be combined to reach some applied outcome. So yeah, Army of None is one that I've read recently that I really.
We'll stick it in the show notes. Army of None. Cool. And just another question. So you mentioned about the team and the team being strong and the team in general and the management team. When you are hiring people, what kind of skills, traits, attributes do you look for? So maybe this will be helpful if I'm starting my own business, but also it could be helpful if I'm a job seeker listening and potentially coming to apply for a job with you or another business like yours. What is it you're really looking for that could help the listeners?
Trust and integrity are the two biggest factors. I can teach tech. I can't teach those other two things. I don't really care what your resume says, where you went to school. I could care less. If you have an acumen to learn, what we do is unique. So you're not going to learn it in school anyway. We do hire hard skill engineers, so that's a prerequisite for some of what we do. But to me, integrity is something that you only get to drop on the floor once, and then after that, it's gone. You can never get it back, or if you can, it takes a long time. And as an executive, trust is critically important. If you're going to be an entrepreneur and build a team around you, you have to be able to trust those people with your kids, your money, everything. You are trusting them with your money and your livelihood, and they're trusting you. So that has to go both ways. Technically, like I said, there's a broad of disciplines that we hire for, but primarily I'm looking for trust and integrity.
Cool. All right, Dave. So yeah, do you think we've about covered everything? Is there anything I've missed?
No, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, no, likewise. An hour genuinely does whiz, doesn't it?
Yeah,
It goes
that does.
quick. Dave, thanks for your time. I hope you're ready for a good week ahead, and I'm sure we'll speak again soon. Thanks again.
Okay. Thanks, Thomas.